Hello, everyone. My name is Catherine Gorley, and I'd like to thank you for tuning in today for another episode of the Injury Prevention Academy, a podcast brought to you by DORN Companies, the country's leading wellness-based pain management and injury prevention company. DORN is committed to reducing costs of healthcare and workers' compensation, as well as reducing lost productivity, which has resulted in over $100 million in savings over the last 20 years for our clients. Joining us today is Rachel Petero. Rachel, we would love if you introduced yourself in your indigenous language.
Kia ora mai tātou, tēnā tātou katoa. Ko wai au, ko waikato te iwi, ko waikato te awa, he piko he taniwha, he piko he taniwha. Ko taupiri te maunga, ko waikato te awa, ko tainui te waka, ko ngā hapu, ko Ngāti Tamauho, ko Ngāti te tahinga, ko Ngāti Whawhākia, ko Ngāti te ata, ngā hapu, ko mangatangi pātoku tūranga waiwai, ko mangatangi te awa, ko maungaro te maunga, ko Rachel Petero e Petero tōku ingoa. Kia ora, Catherine. Kia ora, everybody. Thank you so much for allowing me to introduce myself in my indigenous language, which is Māori. I'm indigenous of Aotearoa, New Zealand. And in my opening, I introduced you. You would have heard my name at the end, because in my culture, that's the least important. It was about connecting you to the places that I belong. So I introduced you to my river, which is called the Waikato River, if you've been to New Zealand. I introduced you to my mountain, my maunga, sacred mountain, which is called Taupiri, and my waka, which is Tainui Waka. So I'm from the tribal area of Waikato Tainui here in New Zealand. We have nearly 80,000 registered members to our tribe, and we are thriving as a people. We've still got a lot of work to do around healthcare, but ultimately, we're thriving. And I introduced you to where my resting place will be at the end of my life, which is called Mangatangi Pā, where my father's family are from, and my 4 sub-tribes, Ngāti Tamauho, Ngāti Whawhākia, Ngāti Te Ata, and Ngāti Tahinga. So thank you so much for allowing me to do that. And congratulations to you, Dawn, for all of the great work you're doing in healthcare.
Oh, no, absolutely. And I love that we're able to have this conversation, Zoom, and obviously how kind of much our planet is becoming kind of a smaller and smaller and more communicative space is just really, really exciting. And for all of our viewers, just to give a little background, Rachel Petero is the founder and CEO of Rise2025 Global. Rise2025 Global is a 100% Indigenous-owned management consultancy with a vision to transform the lives of 100,000 Indigenous women and their families by 2025. Rachel advocates and drives gender equity, diversity, inclusivity, and entrepreneurship for Indigenous women through her leadership and advisory roles in governance, business, and community development. So thank you so much, Rachel, for being able to join us.
Welcome. Great to be here.
And I think one of the first questions that I really wanted to ask you is, obviously, you started Rise2025 to empower those Indigenous women and their families to thrive by what you call having one coaching conversation at a time. So what does this mean to you, and how important is it to have communication be the driving force behind leadership success?
Yeah, Catherine, I believe in that every word that we put out there is important. And so letting the world know that this is our vision, and ultimately it's to transform the lives of Indigenous women and their families. And we use coaching as the practice to do that. And so coaching really changed my life. One coach helped me to leave my HR role in corporate. I was in London at the time, and doing well. But really knew that there was something else out there for me, and so left the security and comfort of a corporate career and jumped out into my my own business. And, that started from a conversation I had with a coach. I never forgot that. And then having done my CIPD, and, traveling that path of HR, the profession of HR, what I really knew was that talent development, that leadership development, that side of HR was really where I wanted to focus. I wasn't so focused on, policy. And of course I knew about that, but really I found my strength in developing talent. And so I believe I can see talent before and see women before they see themselves often.
Mhm.
And so being able to set up a business, and it wasn't called Rise at the start, it was called Gen Viva. And that was a name that I came up with around, work, living to work was sort of the way we used to do it, but, just really working, just working in a really more holistic way was what I was searching for in my business. So I did my first contract with Barclays Retail Bank in a big HR transformation program, knowing people that were working there, and then the rest is history. And I've never been out of work since. And so I'm 12 years in my business now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's transformed. As my business has transformed, I've transformed. And so coaching really is the practice that we have implemented. And I'd love to talk a little bit more about what that's given us. So indigenizing spaces as well is really important to the business, because we are really focused on Indigenous women. So being able to indigenize those spaces, make sure that our programs are fit for purpose, that the women that come to us, they feel safe, they feel culturally safe.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that has got to do with their well-being. We have a beautiful Indigenous-led, developed, designed and delivered program called Tahi that is open to the world. And it's just going, it's beyond my vision even now. So.
Right. Well, what I really love how you described coaching is that leadership development, where coaching is not so much telling people what to do, it's empowering them to make those decisions for themselves.
100%, because our practice is that everyone that we work with is resourceful, creative, and whole. So when we come from that perspective, you're not broken, you don't need to be rescued. You have what you need within you. That's the starting point. And when you approach leadership in that way, it completely changes the conversation, one coaching conversation at a time. And so we set up Indigenous women and a few good men to really acquire those skills. And then we have a beautiful way of doing that in our own Indigenous way, with culture sitting, firmly in the center of our programs.
Yeah, and you said that you started about 12 years ago in that journey. So how is the even just in the different businesses that you've worked with and the different people that you've worked with, how is the communication kind of and leadership strategies changed over that time? Have you seen it become more of an easy conversation, or is it still kind of the same boundaries sometimes that you hit?
Yeah, great question. I think we're always going to hit boundaries, because we're dealing with people. And so if I just take the context of, I think there's been huge change, in that 12 years, especially from a leadership development perspective. I think we lean into those tougher conversations more. And if you take, New Zealand's only 5 million, but we punch above our weight. And having, I've had 16 years internationally, in HR and business, and now in governance roles internationally. I really appreciate what New Zealand has given me out in the world, because if you think about where we've come as a nation, we're quite a young nation. And that's what I used to love about Europe and the UK, is that you had so much history, and you could see it. Whereas New
Everywhere.
Zealand, yeah, everywhere, exactly. Whereas New Zealand is quite a young country, although we have a history. And if you think about where New Zealand has come in terms of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, the Treaty of Waitangi, which has been an ongoing conversation for 180 years for the Crown, in the UK, who operate through our government. And the conversations we've been having for 180 years with Māori, through colonization, through the confiscation of land, those conversations have been ongoing, and Māori have fought for our rights. And now if you look at our parliament and our government, we have a huge representation of women, and so we've just gone over, I think we're 51%, 49% men. Yes. But also the representation of Māori, the indigenous in our government, is across all parties. We are represented. And then you see the indigenous women who are there. Our Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade is Māori, and she wears a traditional moko kauwai, as I do. And she's out in the world, and as indigenous women, they're drawn to that because they see the leadership that looks like them. She may not be indigenous to their country, but we understand this concept of indigenous women rising. So we're all, I always say, when one indigenous woman rises, we all rise. And so, there's been fundamental changes in how leaders lead. Especially here in New Zealand. I think we've got an amazing Prime Minister, Jacinda, who is out in the world, and she leads from a very empathic, compassionate perspective. Not everyone's cup of tea, but actually many people are drawn to her as a leader. So her communication style is different. And I also believe that men are starting to appreciate and potentially use that language of communication to connect, to connect more to the people, to the organizations, to the teams that they build. So fundamentally, there's been a good change. And then at governance levels as well, where the decisions are made. And that's what I worked out on my journey. If I really want to make some change, I've got to get on some of these governance boards. And being able to influence at that level, I think, is really important.
And along with like you said, seeing the shift over these last 10 or so years of having more diversity within either your workplace, the government, pretty much any governing body around the world is starting to really embrace the diversity that obviously so enriches this planet. And I know that both businesses and their employees profit from that diverse workforce, and having those different ideas come in, even in small conversations. And I think also an anti-discriminatory working environment, I think, is so important, and that I've really seen kind of change over the last couple of years. So in your opinion, how can companies create that strong, active diversity and inclusion programs that support and truly benefit all of their employees?
Great question. Actually bring into place coaching and learning culture. That's what I would say really shifts organizations. Because if you think about, so I believe in mentoring 100%. I believe in counseling. I believe in training. And I believe that coaching has a unique space in organizations, and creating a coaching and learning culture is really about allowing spaces that promote anti-discriminatory practices. It promotes wellness, but more importantly, it promotes safety. Yeah, safety and sacred places that your staff, your employees, your teams can go to. And I really advocate for growing your own coaches in your organization as part of your professional and personal growth. And that's what I've seen. You know, I'm working across governments and private sector and community. And when we empower our people, our leaders, with skills that not only grow them, yeah, because, you know, that's what I've learned in coaching. First, you have to look at yourself. Yeah. First, you have to look at yourself and what are the blind spots that we all have. Yeah. And then you acquire some new ways of keeping, you know, we talk about open door policy. Okay, great. But what could that mean? What could be the next iteration of that? It could be open spaces where people feel really safe to come and talk to, you know, the people that have got the badge of honor, to go and have these really powerful conversations. And that's the difference for me. That's why I stepped into coaching, is because it's about a conversation with purpose. And a powerful conversation isn't a long conversation sometimes. It's a powerful conversation because you've asked the right question, because you understand that the person that's come to you is whole, creative, and resourceful. And actually, your role as a coach is to hold space for them, yeah, and allow them to explore whatever it is. And the powerful question that you might ask could be that helps to unlock that for that person to discover what is it they want to get out of the conversation. It could be just asking them, you know, how are you? That could be the powerful question. I've asked that question, you know, so many times, and, you know, often it's a, you know, it's a release of, oh, actually, I'm not good.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And knowing and letting the other person know that you're having those conversations with, that you support them, you know, in creating those safe spaces. It's not just saying that it's a safe space, it's actually demonstrating, you know, obviously actions speak so much louder than words, of creating
100%.
those safe spaces instead of just saying it.
And ultimately, if you talk about cost savings, there's huge cost savings in building. Yeah. So you've got a workforce. Yeah. They need to know that there is a, you know, a pathway for development. Yeah. But the great thing about going on this journey in the way that we deliver it anyway, I know that everyone's different, but we are an ICF accredited, so we understand that the ethics that come with that and the competency framework, is that people feel empowered and valued to not only go on there, you know, to, yes, get some professional development, but every time, without fail, people say to us how much they got out for themselves of going on one of our programs. And that for me is as important, because it can't just be about the workplace. And so we've built all of our programs to say, if it doesn't impact their life outside of work, then we haven't done our job. If there's not a ripple effect outside of their leadership role, how it's changing the conversations with their family, how it's changing how they engage with the community, how it's changing how they look at, you know, sustainability and climate change, you know, all these big topics. If it's not having an impact there, then we feel like we haven't done our job. So really, I think there's such an opportunity to not only do good for your organization, do good for your teams, but do good for the world. Yeah, the ecological framework.
Yeah, and I think so much of that starts within, obviously, building up yourself and kind of that confidence,
Yes.
but also making sure that you're on a healthy and kind of that wellness track individually, so that you can contribute and grow within your community and within kind of that global sphere.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, when we say the global sphere, it might be, you know, being a better recycler. Yeah, it doesn't need to be a big, you know, a life-changing it's about the individual responsibility. And that's what I've learned myself around my coaching journey and my leadership journey is taking 100% responsibility. And when you get your teams to take 100% responsibility for their actions, for their language, for their contribution, then it really changes the game. Because then we're really in that high performance, high value space where people have actually become quite innovative, creative, resourceful, and whole, and are contributing at a different level. And that's the space that I like to work with. I've just come back from our team retreat. We had a weekend, after all of this COVID, and what I really noticed about my team is that they are totally operating in that space, because I don't have time. I've got lots of things going on, so they're very empowered to take 100% responsibility. And even when we make mistakes, actually, we're going to work through that. We're going to work through that and understand how we might do it differently next time.
Yeah, and obviously, I think within that of kind of moving forward for yourself, but also for the community as a whole, it just reminds me of just even over the last couple of years, the conversations around mental health and how you can empower yourself, but also how you can have those conversations, have that communication as to what is going to benefit, but also how do I work through issues, right? And I know in a recent Gallup poll, nearly like a fifth of US workers rated their mental health as fair or even poor. And they reported about 4 times unplanned absences, calling in from work due to mental health, and not being able to go into those safe spaces sometimes because of kind of how they are progressing through everything. And I know that about 4 in 10 adults, have either significant depression or anxiety, or even know someone who suffers from those kind of things. And I know DORN also offers a portal for wellness tips and self-care and mental health awareness. So how do you, because we talked about those safe spaces at work, because you spend so much of your life ultimately at work, what strategies have helped you and some of the people that you worked with to address mental health with employees?
Yeah, great. So if I just use the retreat as an example, so we invited the partners of the woman. They didn't have to bring them, but it was, we thought, let's bring our partners. What we heard from so everyone is coaches in the team, and what we heard from our partners was the indirect impact that our work was having on them, and their mental health, and what it had given them to see us as women rising, and they call, one of the words they used was pioneering, which then allowed them last weekend to then decide as a group of men, actually, what do we need? What do we need? How are we going to fill our cup? How are we going to take care of ourselves in terms of our mental health, our physical health, our spiritual health? And so that was, that's a really tangible outcome of how coaching, indirectly, we weren't even coaching them and we wouldn't try, has the wellness impact, and the mental wellness impact. So then one of my other team members, she is from Samoa, a little island in the Pacific, and if you know anything about all the islands, they're sinking, aren't they? It's the big climate change challenge in the Pacific.
Yes.
One of my team members is the only clinical psychologist on the island of Samoa.
I can't imagine.
Yeah, because you go to New Zealand or you go to Australia to find work. So what's left in Samoa is this beautiful woman that is working with us, but she's come on the coaching journey, a clinical psychologist. She's come on our coaching journey because and you know, I'm not against anyone who's a clinical psychologist. However, her
Mindset.
her mindset, but also her want for herself was to really open up the other side of her, which is this: I'm not here to fix you. I'm not going to remedy you. I've got another space which I think I need to step into, which is coaching, which is whole creative resourceful. Yeah. And I want to step into that as well. So she explained mental health versus mental illness to me in a really simple way.
Mm-hmm.
Mental health is about taking care of your mind. Yeah, that's what it means. Yeah, and when it becomes mental illness, that's where the clinical psychologists get involved, because day-to-day functioning isn't possible. Yeah, you've moved, there's that boundary. And what we've realized is that coaching is a preventative measure for mental illness. And there has to be very clear boundaries around that, because in the coaching space, everyone has a level of mental health, anxiety, yeah, a level. Yeah, there's a spectrum. Yeah, it's about how we manage it. And just imagine those statistics that you shared with me, if they had the opportunity to speak to a coach who is really focused on the whole person, yeah, and get them to not shift into the mental illness side of things and not have to go down that remedy. Okay, you're going to have to be prescribed medication. Imagine what that would look like. And so we've decided that we're going to go to the New Zealand government, because we have very high statistics as well in mental health. And we really want to support that preventative side using coaching, using trained coaches who can really support that mental health of taking care of your mind. Yeah, connecting that to your body, yeah, your spirituality, yeah, and also your essence of who you are. And that's how we practice coaching, the whole person. Coach the person, not the problem.
Right. And having those open conversations, you know, even if it's not just, you know, like we said earlier, of it's not just being specific about something. It can even just be, here's the open space, here is the support, and this is how you can empower yourself to also do those things.
Yeah, and let's have a conversation about what that might look like for you. Yeah, and what you might do differently, and actually what's the reality, you know, that you're facing. And sometimes the reality can get, you know, it can get hyped up. Actually, when you look at it from a different perspective, potentially, you know, and what are the costs? What are the costs for staying in that reality that's not serving you? Yeah. And then, hey, why don't you just think of, you know, wildest dreams? What could it be?
Right.
Yeah, and let's look at all the options and the opportunities for you to move forward, even if it's just 1 millimeter forward to something that you're really passionate about. So
yeah, and one of those conversations over the last couple of years, I think, has been all about the idea of burnout. And I think that's something that can be absolutely avoided by having those conversations early on. You know, even if it's just work styles, if someone has a work style that you really need a quiet space, you need to be able to concentrate, that's one work style, as opposed to someone else who likes noise, who likes things happening around them. If someone who, you know, works better in a quieter environment is constantly in an extremely loud, kind of more chaotic, you know, moving environment, they're going to experience burnout so much faster. And maybe if they have those kind of conversations early on, you can prevent something like that.
I think burnout is definitely manageable. Yeah, it's preventable. And let's be honest, it's not only the organization's responsibility, it's also the individual responsibility to let your leaders, let your organization know what you need. Yeah, and often when I ask women especially, yeah, you know, what is it that you need? yeah, they find it hard to articulate that. I ask a man straight down the line. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And we've got to really ask for what we need in life. And that's a skill. And that's skill. And you mentioned confidence, that, it still comes up in pretty much every conversation. And I believe, I have a formula, which is, we've got to learn about courage first. Yeah. Courage. And courage looks like vulnerability a lot of the time, actually. You can't be courageous if you're not vulnerable. Yeah. So it's finding your voice often, finding your people, where you belong, finding your leadership style, your preferences, what do you like, that's what courage can look like, and looks different. And then you have to get competent. Yeah. You have to be competent in what you've chosen to do. And how do you do that? You train, you go on programs, you develop yourself. And courage plus competence equals confidence. Yeah. And that's, that formula seems to sort of work for, not just because confidence doesn't sit on its own. Yeah.
Right.
It's surrounded by many things, but if you keep it simple, for people, they tend to be able to do that for themselves. And so, yeah, it's a great conversation to have. But confidence, often comes up around well-being. But it's all of our responsibility. And so, take responsibility. Ask for what you need.
Right. Right. And then I think, and I think that companies can see that higher employee engagement of the company, of the overall kind of workplace culture, if you truly give your employees that confidence to, obviously take ownership of the overall company success, take ownership of their own success and their team's success. It's so much of it ties into, I think, creating that culture and creating a place where now you feel empowered to kind of, I'd say, give voice to what you need and give voice to ultimately what a company can need by
Yes,
having
exactly.
those conversations.
Yeah. So this concept of reciprocity, which is very much embedded in our indigenous cultures, whatever you are taking, you better give back even more than you took. Yeah. And so when I come into organizations and they say, oh, we've got a culture, organization culture issue, the first thing I look at is at the leadership. Yeah.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
often 99.9% stems from the leadership.
Yeah, because I think in my experience, it's more of a trickle down effect. If you have those strong conversations happening up here, you're going to have those strong conversations happening with everyone.
Yeah. And again, this waterfall effect of it trickling down. Well, actually, you need to look at that, because it's actually about reciprocity. Means that your employees, they can't walk up a waterfall, so you need to change that model to potentially it's a lake where there's conversations that go round and round and round, and people get to feedback, and this beautiful feedback. I often find the best leaders are the ones that can take feedback, and quite critical feedback, but take the gold within that. Yeah. So yes, sometimes it might hurt, the words, but actually it's the gold underneath. So what are they really saying? What's underneath that feedback? And through the practice that we have, it's about receiving feedback, even positive feedback, actually, and we call it as a taonga, as a treasure. Yeah, because there's gold in that feedback, no matter how poorly it's wrapped.
Okay.
And if you choose to look at that feedback as a leader, that will be your undoing. That's the bit that will really elevate you and help you to look at those blind spots, again, that we all have.
Yeah, and I think having companies understand that it's not just a say a 24-hour shift, right, between a culture. It takes time for those conversations to happen and then to have that change affected, especially when I think companies and employees need kind of that understanding of this is a journey that we're all going to take together. It's not just something that says, okay, cool, we have a new culture. That's that. Yeah, it doesn't work.
Yeah. And so, you know, I just think we have a Māori value that I think it really fits here. And so we practice this, and it's called a manaki. And manaki is to take care of, yeah, be the best host that you can be. You know, so that when someone leaves your premises, that they go, oh, wow, you know, I was so well looked after. And so this concept of manaki is across New Zealand, actually. Whether you're in private government, people talk about our values as indigenous, and people talk about whether or not you have provided that manaki as an organization, and you're known for that. And so, you know, that's a culture, you know, that's a value that's come from an indigenous way of being that is now just normal in our government, in organizations. And I just think it's so beautiful that we're taking on these concepts, the traditional knowledge that has helped us, you know, survive. And now it's really helping our country to, you know, rise and then ultimately to thrive as a nation. Yeah. And so it becomes very collective, not the individual. So yes, we need to take responsibility, but we're part of a system. Yeah, an ecosystem of the land, of the people, of the place. And actually, when we are collectively taking care of each other, you know, everyone benefits. And that's quite a beautiful, unique way of thinking about leadership. Our way is about the collective. It might take longer, as you say, but actually it becomes embedded in everyone. And so this concept of manaki has become embedded in our nation. And I think it's a beautiful thing.
No, I really love that whole idea of obviously growing within your community and making, you know, having those conversations that really propel, you know, your own goals forward, but also, you know, just the whole idea of something moving, right? You know, especially when it comes to building a culture or even building an idea that can spread beyond, you know, like what you're trying to do, you know, expanding something from New Zealand through the rest of the world. Yes. And having people take some of those cues and take some of those ideas and grow them within themselves.
100%, and their communities and things that are really important to them. So yeah, the same concept that we've used here in New Zealand, you know, starting from ourselves, growing it out to our communities, to our government, to our tribal nations, to private organizations, is the same concept for globally. Yeah. And the great thing is that our women get to indigenize the programs that they deliver for themselves. You know, we're not the owners of it, we're only the stewards. That's another concept of being the steward versus the owner.
Yes.
Kaitiakitanga. So yeah, it's wonderful to be part of that transformation of people's lives. And then when you hear back of what they've done for themselves and their people, and you're like, wow, it might be in business, it might be in leadership, in their career, it might be in community. Amazing.
Yeah, and through Rise 2025, you know, you've been able to support and provide that leadership access to Indigenous women in New Zealand and around the world, especially as they get in, they're able to get into those businesses and really spread that kind of structure. So what are the top 3 things that women can do in the business world today to empower themselves, be heard, especially in what is traditionally known as male-dominated fields?
Yes. So first, you know, I really would say to you as an empowered leader and an empowered woman, to take your space. Yeah, men have been doing that forever. We need to own those spaces. So work out what that space is, if it's in HR, if it's in well-being, if it's in finance, and then really just take that space and what does that look like? It'll look like different for each person, but first you've got to identify that for yourself. And my friend and I, Joe Cribb, we wrote a book called Take Your Space. So and it talks to many of these concepts. So 8 chapters: value your worth, own your confidence, put your wellness mask on first, give back, to your communities. All of those things will help you to take your space. I think the second thing, really, for leaders, especially in our male-dominated industries, is we do need to be inclusive of men and bring them on the journey. Find the men that are going to champion it for you. Allow them the space to walk alongside you. I've always had male allies and sponsors, always, because they speak a different language, they communicate differently, and we need both communication styles to bring organizations on the journey. So that's the second thing I would do. And the third thing is be open to be coached and to receive feedback. Especially the most critical feedback I've ever had is the feedback that elevated me to where I am now, because I listened to what was underneath that. And so be open to be mentored and coached and get what you need in that space to really hear what people think of your leadership. Because we're a brand in our own right, and so we know about brands is it's really about what people say about you when you're not in the room. And so be your own brand. Be your own advocate.
That's great. No, I love that.
Ask for what you need.
Okay. Yeah, and having those conversations and having that communication.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly.
That's wonderful. And I know that as companies continue to change and evolve, especially with the kind of almost post-COVID, world that we're living in, it's still very much a part of it. But I know that businesses have opened up those conversations, right? Whether it is for mental health, whether it is kind of working with the employees that you have, and having those conversations and welcoming new ideas, and obviously navigating different work structures, whether it's having people in a more hybrid environment, having different leadership models than maybe 20 or 30 years ago was not even a conversation, which is really exciting. What can companies keep in mind today to make sure that they are strong and successful in our ever-changing world?
No, I think it's we have to build for the future versus build for now. And so we have this really great concept which is called Be a Good Ancestor. And what that helps people to do, and what that helps leaders to do, is to really put themselves out into that space where it's beyond us today. And being a good ancestor means to look through the eyes of your grandchildren. Who would they want you to be?
And having a look to the future in terms of, if something only works for 5 to 10 years, that's not the avenue that you should be moving towards. It's something you need to look. For me, I always think of, I need to look in terms of centuries. I can't look beyond, right, in terms of, say, months or individual years.
So that's definitely I mean, my ancestors were very visionary. They set up things for me that they did hundreds of years ago. And so as Māori here, we are setting up strategy 100, 500 years in advance. And a lot of traditional organizations say, how do you do that? Oh, you've got to take on a different worldview. Yeah, it's got to be beyond you. And so this concept of being a good ancestor is quite common here now, is to look beyond yourself and really start to encompass what it will be like, and whether it's right or wrong, it's it just is, and it helps you to see that future horizon. Yeah, that future horizon that obviously keeps moving, because it's really not a destination, it just keeps moving. Yeah. So that is something that I think as leaders of organizations and governance boards, we need to get better at, because otherwise we're going to have to keep creating strategy after strategy after strategy, and that's tiring. Actually, we just need that big beautiful vision out there, that your grandchildren will be proud of you for putting in place, because they're going to be great grandchildren actually, that really the work that needs to be done is in the reality, in the present, is to really have those strong milestones and whatever the language we want to use, KPIs that keep us moving towards that. And the biggest thing that I've learned is that people remember how you make them feel. Yeah. And so make your people, your teams, feel valued. Make sure that they feel heard. Make sure that they feel seen in how you build out your work plans, your workforce plans, your development plans, your organizational structure, and make the work matter for each and every person, and build these beautiful cultures that are about growing and learning together. That's it's what I believe.
Right. And I think that every company around the world can take those lessons, obviously, that we've learned, over the course of a company's life, or even over the course of the last couple of years within their employees, and starting and having those conversations and making sure that you are supporting the people around you, and also just supporting growth, I think is so very important.
Yeah. I'm all about, if I'm not growing, then I'm not fully participating. I'm not growing. Yeah. If I'm not feeling a bit uncomfortable in that growth, then I'm comfortable, which means I'm not growing. So those are all signs. Yeah, if it's too comfortable, you're not growing. So get in, and growth can feel just it's new. It's learning something new. Yeah, it might be a new language, might be a new instrument. Yeah, it might be a new skill. That's what I mean by uncomfortable. That can be uncomfortable, and then it becomes comfortable again, and then you do something else.
Right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Rachel.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and thank you so much to our viewers for joining us as well. And make sure to tune in next time to learn about the innovative steps, programs, and growth of today's world of safety.